So, it's finally happened.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Wait.
Everybody calm down!
Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, in my opinion, one of the best shows ever made. A quintessential 90s and early 2000s satirical horror fantasy show which arguably laid the modern groundwork for serialised genre storytelling and for inspiring the formatting and tone of later shows like Supernatural, Smallville, The Flash, and a plethora of others. Its influence on pop culture is undeniable.
And tall tales about slaying Buffy the Vampire don't make it into the pages of a real newspaper.
Yes, now. It's 11 o'clock at night. Who are you hoping to hook up with now, Spike and Drusilla? Just
Buffy the Hunger Slayer?
Here. Phoebe Buffay in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
A reboot of some type has been semi-consistently discussed for decades, with the original cast mostly dismissing the rumours as fantasies which were never going to come to fruition, much to the disappointment of many Buffy fans. But now it seems the wait is over, with Sarah Michelle Gellar confirming a reboot pilot is currently in the works at Hulu, posting a picture of herself wearing the same sushi pyjamas she wore in the Season 4 episode, Goodbye Iowa. So, what details have been released and what can we expect? Well, let's start with what's been confirmed so far by Sarah Michelle Gellar, who's now given interviews on the subject.
I've heard that it's coming back, and I also heard that you are pleased with the script, but said also that it's got to be done right.
Yes, I mean, I think that's true, and I've always stood by that I was never sure there was a way to do it. And when Chloe Zhao first came to me, I was so overwhelmed. I mean, she's one of the only women to ever win the Academy Award as Best Director. I mean, she's someone that I idolize. And she said, I have this idea, and I can't do it without you. And I was like, And after the last 3 years of working it out together and workshopping it and having the incredible Zuckermans, I think we're getting close.
She's also provided similar information in an Instagram post. Let's focus in on the 4 people mentioned in the post. First, Gail Berman. Berman is co-owner and founding partner of The Jackal Group, a production entity formed in partnership with Fox Networks Group. Essentially, she's a high-level executive at Fox and has been for a long time. Importantly, Berman was executive producer on both Buffy and Angel, but was also the chief architect in the shock cancellation of another Joss Whedon show, Firefly. Berman reportedly has a falling out with Whedon and opted to air the episodes out of order and during the so-called Friday night death slot, ultimately leading to its cancellation.
She's a witch! Get her!
Berman has reportedly been trying to reboot Buffy since at least 2018, although this was at a time when Whedon was still poised to write and direct as he had not been blackballed from Hollywood yet. According to Deadline, alongside Berman, Fran and Kaz Katsui will also be returning as producers, as will Dolly Parton's company, Sandollar. Given that Whedon is now persona non grata, Chloe Zhao is poised to direct the pilot and possibly be showrunner. Zhao's career has been a mixed bag so far, winning both Best Director and Best Picture at the Oscars with her 2020 drama Nomadland, the first female to ever do so, while also being responsible for one of the MCU's biggest commercial and critical flops, The Eternals. We also have what would appear to be the core writing team in sisters Nora and Lila Zuckerman, who have collectively worked on such shows as Suits, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Fringe, and both currently operate as showrunners for the Peacock original crime comedy series, Poker Face. So, this is everything we know so far, but this is the internet, and so wild speculation is a must. First, what kind of show is this likely to be? Is it a prequel, a straight-up reboot, a sequel, a requel? Well, let's check what kind of language the people in the know have used thus far. Neither Lila Zuckerman nor Chloe Zhao have made any statements at the time of recording, but over on X-Twitter, Nora Zuckerman retweeted a Hollywood Reporter article which used the term reboot, while Sarah Michelle Gellar calls it a revival, while also stating in a recent interview that it doesn't have to be a prequel. So, what do we think is the most likely format for this new show? Well, it seems a prequel, a show following previous Slayer generations, is probably least likely, as Deadline sources describe it as a next chapter in the Buffyverse, and it's hard to imagine where Buffy herself would actually fit into that type of story. A hard reboot also doesn't make much sense since Sarah Michelle Gellar is coming back, presumably as Buffy, as everyone involved must know that to bring the lead actress back as anything other than her biggest and most beloved role would be nothing short of insanity from a marketing standpoint. So, some sort of sequel, possibly in the form of a requel, would make most sense. For those not familiar with the term, don't feel too bad. It's a word that's really only existed for about 5 minutes due to it being necessitated by the non-stop barrage of remakes and sequels that we've had in recent years. And that's exactly what it refers to. A next step in a franchise which is a combination of a remake and a sequel, allowing studios to bring back beloved original characters in a familiar format and story, while simultaneously passing the torch to a new cast of characters who will be carrying the franchise forward from that point on. Scream 5 is probably the best recent example. Okay, so it's a likely requel in which Buffy passes the torch to a newer, younger cast of Scoobies, though let's face it, probably a more annoying, less lovable version of the Scoobies than we got in the original, so let's call them the Scrappies for short. But are any of the other original cast likely to return? Well, some of the original cast have responded to Sarah Michelle Gellar's post, but as yet, no hint at any solid returns. So, who might be likely to return? Let's first rule out characters whose actors have sadly passed away in real life, namely Andy Hallett as Lorne and Glenn Quinn as Doyle. Next, any characters who died in-universe during the show's run, I'm going to remove, as I honestly feel that bringing these characters back via resurrection or, God forbid, some MCU-style time travel or multiverse contrivance would be a slap in the face of the original show. I'm also going to remove Kate as she left Angel in Season 2 and Amanda as, honestly, who cares? Quite frankly, the both of them are only mentioned because they were included in this picture that I found on the internet. Now we can focus just on the characters who are alive, or at least who are undead, so let's check the roster. Tom Lenk mainly seems to be doing social media and stage comedy at this point in his career, and so if he was asked to return, I can't imagine in a million years that he'd turn it down. Michelle Trachtenberg is in a similar boat, last starring in a web series in 2015, as well as starring in some straight-to-DVD films, so again, I think she'd likely relish a return. Eliza Dushku as Faith would be a fantastic return, but this is unfortunately probably less likely as she hasn't appeared on screen since 2017, and she reportedly announced her retirement from acting in 2024, citing her career shift to psychedelic-assisted mental health therapist. There are also a few more potential returns to consider from both Buffy and Angel before we get to the core Scoobies and the Vamps. From Buffy, there's Oz, Riley and Clem, and from Angel, Gunn, Fred / Ilaria, and Connor. In terms of our Buffy trio, James Charles Leary as Clem I think would be a shoo-in given that he returned for the Audible series, while Mark Blucas I'd say is probably about 50-50. Although he does do the odd bit of acting here and there, his primary focus these days seems to be raising his family and running his farm in Pennsylvania. Seth Green, on the other hand, is all about the work. In addition to showrunning Robot Chicken, he provides voice work for seemingly every animated show in existence, from Family Guy to a variety of MCU projects, Love, Death and Robots, and just a slew of others. Whether he'd actually have the time to return to Buffy probably just depends on whether he'd prioritise it over his 5,000 other projects. For our Angel trio, both J. August Richards and Amy Acker return for the 20th anniversary of the show to do a cover shoot for Entertainment Weekly, and both are still active actors, starring in a variety of shows over the past few years, and so I think a return for both characters, even though neither ever actually appeared in the original Buffy, is quite likely if it were offered. Vincent Carthiza, on the other hand, has acted less and less in recent years, appearing only in guest spots across an array of shows, and so his return might be less likely. Okay, now for what we really came here for. What about the core Scoobies? Well, Alison Hannigan hasn't yet responded to the news in any public way, but she does post periodic pictures of her days on the Buffy set. Whether this means she'd welcome a return to that same set, or whether she'd prefer to leave it as is, as a fond memory, well, that's anyone's guess. But I'd err on the side of her not returning, since she didn't reprise her role in the Audible audio series in 2023. Someone who did reprise their role in the Audible series, however, was Anthony Stewart Head. This might indicate that he'd be up for a live-action return to Buffy, but there are issues with this idea. For one, while he could record audio for the Audible series from anywhere, for the live-action reboot he'd have to leave his home in Somerset, England, to film in America, which is probably unlikely given that being away from his family and his home was why he partially left the show after Season 5 of the original show. He also stars in the UK-based series Ted Lasso, which could cause scheduling conflicts. The final Scooby who almost certainly won't be returning is Nicholas Brendan as Xander, who since leaving Buffy has accrued a series of serious mental and physical health problems, as well as a series of arrests and prosecutions for a variety of offences. Last but not least, we have the Vamps. David Boreanaz, James Marsters, Juliet Landau and Mercedes McNabb. I've left these until last as the same reason why they probably won't return, or at least shouldn't return in my opinion, applies to them all. Age. They're all supposed to be playing immortal, unchanging vampires in their teens or 20s, yet the actors playing the roles now are 44, 55, 59 and 62. To bring them back to the same roles decades later would have all the believability of the actors in Grease actually being teenagers. But don't take my word for it. Here's what James Marsters had to say in 2005 when asked about a Spike spin-off series. Quote, "As long as I could do it within, say, the next 4 or 5 years. Past that, I'm too old. Spike's a vampire and I've got high standards. You have to believe that the guy is not aged since we met him." End quote. That interview took place almost 20 years ago to the month. I think the idea of any of the vamps coming back for anything more than the briefest of cameos, which would give the studio a chance to apply some de-aging effects that could look half decent over just a scene or two, is nothing but a pipe dream at this point. Or it would be if James Marsters hadn't just given us an update on Instagram.
Elephant in the room out of the way, which is that it's not a good thing for me to talk about the Buffy reboot. I'm sorry if you were coming here hoping for some news, but in the interest of having the project be the best it can be, it's best that I keep my mouth shut right now. So I'm going to do that because I think I'm like everybody. I'm very excited that we're gonna learn more about the journey of Buffy Summers and how she saves the world, because I think the world needs her. So I'm going to do my part by doing nothing right now. So we're going to begin.
Although he doesn't give much away, his coy demeanour suggests that he might have rethought his previous, and in my opinion laudable, opinion from 20 years ago. I'm thinking that probably for reasons relating to dead presidents, he probably no longer thinks that he's naturally aged out of the role, as he once did. The idea of a Buffy and or Angel reboot for that matter is something I've been thinking about on at least a monthly basis since the show's ended. A sliver of hope was ignited after Whedon's success with Marvel's Avengers Assemble, as he was able to showcase his undeniable talents to a much broader audience than just fans of his TV shows. But the longer we went without seeing any real movement, the less I actually wanted a revival. For one, the cultural change from the 1990s to the 2020s has been staggering. The culture wars have been raging for well over a decade at this point, and one of the biggest victims of it have been fans of storytelling. Hollywood as a whole has pushed aside plot, world building and characters, and replaced them with a focus on niche socio-political concerns, namely identity politics. This has harmed the vast majority of films and shows that have been produced in recent years, but arguably none have suffered more than those that have attempted the strong female hero trope. I'm going to address this more in a follow-up video, but for now, suffice it to say that Natasha Romanoff, Wanda Maximoff, Captain Marvel, Galadriel, Rey Skywalker, and a whole host of others have suffered from the curse of the Mary Sue. Again, I'll be going over this in more detail in a follow-up, so for now I'll just let Emily Blunt have the last word. As covered earlier, the majority of the original cast are either dead in-universe, and so some terribly contrived magic or time travel or multiverse bollocks would have to be employed to bring them back, or else the actors are simply too old to reprise their roles in any meaningful way, meaning that either the studio would burn through their money after about the first episode purely due to over-reliance on de-aging technology, or we're going to end up with at least half the cast being helicoptered to hospital with broken hips after attempting their first roundhouse kick.
I'm old.
But at least Sarah Michelle Gellar's back as Buffy. Surely that's good enough for a reboot? In my opinion, no. Not in the slightest. The world of Buffy consists of both her and her Scoobies. For me, this was the entire point of the show. That people, even the strongest of people, are stronger together. The reason Buffy lived longer than most if not all previous Slayers is that she had friends and family to lean on. Without that support, I'm afraid the reboot will likely result in the premature death not just of Buffy as a character, but for Buffy as a world and a concept and everything it once inspired. Finally, and regardless of what you think of him, Joss Whedon is Buffy's creator and his talents as a filmmaker are absolutely undeniable. I'd argue that his achievements are actually unparalleled in Hollywood. I can't think of a single other filmmaker who's not only created 3 shows which were massive hits, either commercially, critically, or both, and which have stood the test of time better than pretty much anything else I've ever seen, but who has also shown that they can write and direct one of the biggest box office blockbusters of all time. For me, there is no Buffy without Whedon and the original writing staff. It's as simple as that. So, what are your thoughts on the reboot? Feel free to let us know in the comments below, and if you're interested in seeing these kinds of videos in the future, please make sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you soon. Ta-ra.